What's up, guys? We'll dive right back into our project. If you remember, we left off with spawning enemies, and that was pretty cool. Here, I'll just show you so you guys remember and make sure. And there we go. We have our enemies spawning. What we're going to start doing today, I was going to jump right into placing towers and everything, but I ran into a small problem when I built this project the first time, and I thought I would just save the headache and talk about it right now. We made that one script where we created a loader class, correct? And we were loading basically all of our singletons, and we dragged it and placed it on the main camera. The problem that I ran into when I created another singleton, and it was our tower manager, and that basically manages all the towers that we're going to be building on the map and placing them on our build sites. The instance actually wasn't being created properly, and it just didn't work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to dive in and talk a little bit about what generics are and what we can do differently. Instead of using a loading, basically, we're going to take all of our singletons and drag them onto the camera, just like we did with our loader class. We don't actually need the loader. But we had to write all this code right here in the awake method. Not the start, just the awake method, this little bit right here. Every time we want to create a singleton, we have to basically make that, rewrite this code over and over and over again. So I wanted to just talk about generics a little bit, and we're actually going to make a singleton generic class that any class that we create, if we want it to be a singleton, we'll inherit from that class. And I'm going to just jump into it and discuss it a little bit so you know what generics are if you're not familiar. Right now, let's see, we're not going to need anything right here. I'm not going to delete this yet. I'm going to talk about what generics are a little bit. All right. So let me give myself some space here. If we were to make just a really simple method, and we'll call it print value, and we'll pass in a string called value. Okay, and then all we're going to do is print this to our console. And we will say that this is value. And then we want to just make sure we call our variable there. Okay, so nothing crazy, right? We're doing a simple print statement, right? So if I call print value and pass in Jacob, it is going to print Jacob in our console, correct? Let's just see it work. Whoops, I need to get rid of that full screen for now. All right, so let's see. Here we go. I can stop the running. You see that it printed value Jacob, right? It's pretty cool, right? Simple. I mean, not cool really at all. But the problem is, so the cool thing with generics is, like, what if we wanted to print a number? We can't do that because it only takes a string. So right now, we have to only pass in strings, right? We'd have to make a whole new function here. Print num, that takes an int. And that can also be called value. That doesn't matter. And then we can just copy and paste this. Okay, so now this will print a number, right? So we can say print num and pass in a 6. Okay, save it, and I will run the program again. And over here in our console, we see value 6 and Jacob. So the point of generics is that we can write one function and pass in, a number, a string, a double, anything we want, okay? So how would we rewrite these two? And trust me, this is a very simple example. We're going to do a little more difficult one next. I just kind of want to break in what generics are and how they're used. So if we wanted to use generics for this situation, we can call it, let's call it print any, since we can pass in any value. And you do a less than sign and a greater than sign here. And normally it's just, common practice to use a T, or it's normally a T to represent a generic type. And then all we would do is, instead of typing like int or string here, we type T here and then value. And T is basically the blank placeholder. I don't want that equal sign there. T is basically like a blank placeholder for the type you're passing in. And the really cool thing about this is we can pass any value type in with this. And so now if we do let's just print this debug statement here again. Tab over. So the cool thing is, yeah, you can pass any value type into this method that we created. And the way that we would use it is very simple. Basically, when you call, we are going to say print any, just like before. The only thing different is we're going to do in the less than and greater than symbol. And now this is where you declare what you're passing in. So if we wanted to pass in a string, we'd type string here. And then in parentheses, we would pass in a string. This is cool, right? All right, so one thing that we need to do, it's yelling at us. We are going to have to just make sure this value gets casted to a string. There we go. And close my quotations there. So this is how you would do this. And what's cool is this is going to work. And I'm not going to run it yet. We can do print any, pass in an int, and pass in, I don't know, 56. All right. Now let's, now the reason we have to cast it to a string is because we are just printing the value. We're not actually using it. This actually allows us to pass in strings, integers, anything that we want to right now. The next example will be a little better example, but I mean, this makes the point and it's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and print this, and we're going to see this is cool and 56, and those are all using the same method. So we can delete this, and let's go ahead and make the first two print any's, and we're going to pass in a string here. And print any here, and let's pass in an int. All right. And now let's go ahead and run this again, and we're going to have exactly the same output, all with one function. So if you don't think it changed, why don't we change our values here real quick? Make this mark number 8, Devslopes rocks, and we are number 1. All right, so let's run that, and you will see it update now. So mark 8, Devslopes rocks, and number 1. So I know that's a basic example, but it's a good stepping stone to explain what generics are. And now we can do a little bit more complicated of a example here. I'm just going to delete this stuff to get it out of the way. Well, I can't delete that. Closing brace. All right. Or curly brace. All right, so we can make a whole class. We can do a public class, and we'll do a key value pair. That's the name of the class. And so a key value pair, if you're familiar with dictionaries, you can pass in, normally you pass in some sort of key, right? And then a value. So that key could be a string, an integer, or anything, and same with the values. So in this case, we are going to say T, and now T, it doesn't have to be T, but we're going to write T key here just to show that you can write anything there. It's just common practice to use T. And then T value, and then greater than sign. And now we can just curly brace. We have our class here, okay? So now we can make some public variables. T key is key, and it's just type T key. So if someone initialized or instantiated this class, they would pass in a type here and a type here. So like pretend they put integer here, right? This would be an integer. So the key would be an integer, and same with the value, whatever people are doing. It's just a placeholder of the value type. So if we type in public T value and then value. So we just created two variables. The value is type T value. So just blank. It can be anything that gets passed in. Okay. It's just a placeholder. All right. And then we can create an initializer for this class, and we'll call it key value pair. And here we'll pass in type T key, and this variable will name key, and T value, and we'll name this variable value underscore value, just so it stands out a little more. All right, opening and closing curly braces. And what we'll do here is this key will be assigned to this key. So it's just an initializer, okay? So key equals underscore key. And then value equals underscore value. All right, so we initialize these values, and I'm not knowing how to type. So we initialize these values, all right? And then we can do something as simple as like a print method, okay? So we'll make a public void print, and we'll just print to our console so we can see debug.log, and we are going to print, all right, this is the key, and then key to string. All right, and then we'll just copy and paste this for the value. Value. All right, so how would we use this? So we're in a different class up here, right? So we want to create a new instance of it. So what we would do here, and we're just doing this in the awake so it runs right away. We would call key value pair, all right, and then we would do the less than and greater than signs, and you would put in whatever you want here. So let's see, so the key, I don't know, does the key make sense to be a number maybe? Sure. So we can put integer, and then the value can be a string. So that's the type of the variable that we're creating a new instance of. So we can call this anything. Let's call it course, okay? And then you'd say equals, and then you say new, just like you're used to. And then you do key value pair again, and you pass in the same thing, so int, string, and then greater than sign. And then here's where you pass in your variables. So let's see, the number one course, and then pass in your Devslopes. All right. So there we initialized it. We initialized this class, and we created the key value pairs, down here where it was T key and T value. This just created a new instance of this class, and now it is of type integer and string. So now if we want to call that print function that we created, we would say course.print, and we already passed in everything here. So this is going to print key, space, and then number one, and this is going to do value, colon space Devslopes. All right, let's save it and run this. All right, there we go. So key is number 1 and value is Devslopes. That's pretty cool, right? And why don't we create a new instance now? I'm going to just copy and paste this just to show you how cool it is. We'll leave that up there, space it out. Sometimes I hate copy and paste. All right. And let's call this one, I don't know, lesson. All right, but let's not do integer and string. I don't know, let's do string and string, okay? So now it's yelling at us because we have a number here, right? So let's type in number 1 course. I mean, it's lesson. And then it is going to be learning about generics. Bonk. All right. So now we can do the same thing here and just do lesson dot, call the print method. Let's save it and run it. And now you'll see the same thing up here, but then 2 more. Number 1 lesson, learning about generics. It's pretty sweet, right? So we created this one class and we can reuse it in a lot of different ways. And so that's what I want to do right now. I want to create one class that can initialize all of our classes that we want to be singletons just by simply inheriting them up here where mono behavior is. So we're going to do that right now. Okay, what we can do is let's just close out of this loader. We're not going to use it anymore. So let's go into our scripts. Let's click on it and you can do command delete or right click it and delete it. We don't need it. And then if you click on main camera, it's going to yell at us that it's missing a script. Go ahead and just click on the little gear and hit remove component. Our game is officially broken now, but that's all right. We're going to fix it shortly, I promise. Right click your script folder right here and hit create a new C# script. And we're going to call this singleton, okay? Now double click and open that. All right, now we don't need much of this. Let's see here. We don't need the system.collections. We're not going to be using that library. And we don't need this start and update. All right, so we want to make this a generic class that other classes can inherit, okay? So we're going to make this, we're going to do our little greater than or our less than and greater than sign and put a T in here. And this is going to inherit from mono behavior still. And then we're going to, we also have to, for generics, we have to say where T is mono behavior, okay? So that's basically saying like if we passed in game manager as the type, it would say game manager is inheriting type, you know, the library mono behavior, okay? And then we can create our, actually, let's just look at this. So we have a public static instance here, right? And then all of this stuff we're going to use inside of our singleton. We have to change a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. We don't need it anymore. The static game manager instance. So go ahead and select that and cut it, right click, cut, or command X. I believe it's control X in the Windows world. And let's paste it right here. But obviously we don't want this to say game manager, right? So we don't want it to be type game manager. We want it to be type T. So it's generic and then instance. And we don't need it to say equal to null anymore. Let's just leave it like that. All right, very cool. And then let's create a getter for our instance because we want this to be private, not public. And we're actually going to go through the rest of our project and fix some things. And I know we left a lot of things public up to this point, but we're going to fix all that. So we're going to make this private and require a getter to get it. Okay, so do public static of type T and then instance, and use a capital I for this because they has to be different. And the capital I lets you know, at least like once your project gets bigger, if you always use the same type of syntax, you'll know that it is a publicly available variable, okay? So to make a getter, you type in get and then curly brackets. And so right here, okay, so down here we can obviously say return instance. If I can type, there we go. Okay, so we're going to return the instance here, and what we want to put in this getter is everything that we had in our awake right here. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this. So we're in our game manager. Actually, why don't we cut this because we're not going to need it there anymore, and then go ahead and delete your awake method. All right, and go back to your singleton, and inside of this, we're going to go ahead and paste that. All right, and let's tab things over. If you hold command and hit the square brackets, it'll tab over everything if it's highlighted. Nice, nifty little thing. Let's get rid of these extra spaces. All right, so we have errors, but this is the code that we want. This is creating a singleton instance, basically same as before. If the instance is null, you set the instance to this current class, okay? And so what we're going to do is, instead of typing this, you're going to do find object of type, and then you're going to pass in, you'll do the less than and greater than, and put of type T, and then do opening and closing parentheses, just one semicolon. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is actually going to find, it's going to look through your hierarchy and find any script, any class name named T, okay? So let's say we passed in game manager. It's going to find the object type of game manager and create an instance of it. That's really cool, right? All right. And then so if the instance is not equal to, and then we want the same thing to type game manager, or T, it's just a placeholder. It's a generic placeholder. So if it's not equal to that instance, we want to destroy this game object just like before, okay? So let's see here. We want to do the destroy, obviously the same thing, find, all right. And there we go. So now we would destroy that class or that object if it doesn't exist. All right. And you probably are wondering, I don't know if I explained this before, but in C#, if you only have one line underneath an if statement, you don't need the curly braces, which is kind of cool. Cleans up. I think it looks cleaner. I like it. All right. And then let's see here. The don't destroy on load is going to be the find type T. And that's it. We just created our singleton class. And now we're like, well, how are we going to use it? It's even easier than you think. All right, just save your singleton here. And then over at your game manager, this is our only singleton at the moment, okay? All we do here is delete mono behavior and type in singleton, and it should self-populate for you. And then do less than and greater than signs and type in game manager. This is where, okay, this is the T, this is the type. So that's the generic type. Okay, we're passing it in, so we're creating an instance, and we now just created an instance of our game manager, which is really cool. So now we don't have any scripts running. Nothing would run if we run it. It just crashes, right? But all we have to do is go into your scripts and take your game manager script and just drag it No, I take that back. Go to your prefab. We need a game object here. And that should have your script attached to it. All right, and drag your game object into the main camera. All right, so save it and run it. Okay, so we still have errors. Let's just see what's going on. Oh, okay, so we just changed Game Manager instance. We made the small lowercase instance private. We can't access that anymore. But we made a public getter right here, but it's a capital I. So go into your enemy script. And I just double clicked on that error and it pulled it open for me. So if we put a capital I there, that's fixed. And let's see, I think we're good now. Let's go ahead and run it. And there we go. We're back to where we were. Our enemies are spawning. Everything is good. And we have a singleton instance. And so anytime we make another class, it's just as simple as inheriting from it, which is really sweet. So I'm going to call this video done. And where we'll pick up next time is we're actually going to go through and clean up these public variables. We'll go over how to access them and what we should be doing to program the right way. You got to be clean, and you don't want variables, accidentally getting changed by other classes and accessed the wrong way. So we're going to fix all that, and then we're going to start diving into some UI. We're going to put some buttons on the screen so we can place towers. All right, I will see you shortly, guys.